if Trump has changed since his first term, it looks like he would be a little more likely to say, okay, the U.S. does have to play a leadership role in the world. But just like old Trump, he's going to try to do that without it even involving a threat of sending in troops.
Welcome to the Debrief with the Washington Examiner. I'm Tiana Lowe Doescher here with senior columnist Tim Carney. Tim, Donald Trump back in the White House, and already we have a deal. He promised he would make a deal with Israel, and it's manifested. Not everyone necessarily is thrilled with it, but what does it portend for his upcoming foreign policy?
Well, it shows that his deal-making extends to wanting peace. And so this is very interesting. I mean, he said it very clearly in his inaugural address. He said that he will measure success not just by the battles we win, but by the wars we end, and most importantly, the wars we don't get into. And so that idea of ending a war, I mean, that's channeling Ronald Reagan and his D-Day speech. Mm-hmm. It's got a really long history going back to like General Sherman trying to end the Civil War. That ending a war is a big part of the point. But for the last few years, ending the war, that sort of talk when it came to Ukraine or when it came to Israel and Hamas was seen as surrendering. Oh, you can't end a war. You can't end it until Russia's totally driven out of Ukraine, or you can't end it until Hamas is eliminated. Well, Trump just comes in, he says, we're going to make deals and we're going to end these wars. It's not that there's any ambiguity about who's a good guy or the bad guy, but he wants them over. And that is, I think, an extraordinary tack from the way sort of the discussion on the Republican Party has been in the last few years.
And Donald Trump's first cabinet confirmation to make it across the finish line, Marco Rubio, got unanimous support in the Senate. Every single Democrat voted for him. Mm-hmm. I assume some of it has to do with Rubio's positive personal reputation in general, but also the tone and tenor that he took in that speech. It was very different even from what Rex Tillerson was saying in the first term.
Yeah, so Rubio is hawkish. I mean, he has been, as a senator, one of the most hawkish senators. You'd put him with Lindsey Graham and, you know, the late John McCain as far as that goes. But in the confirmation hearings, while he was very clear, you know, China is a rival, this is somebody we have to worry about. He talked about North Korea, Russia, Iran. He also sort of, you got the impression that he doesn't want the U.S. being the world's policeman, which is a change for Rubio, but it also reflects, I think, what we're looking at with the second Trump term, which wasn't too different from the first Trump term, except the first Trump term had a lot more hawkish personalities in there. Mike Pompeo is closer to neoconservatism. John Bolton, an uber hawk. and so this second term, you know, Rubio's kind of the more hawkish person, but he's less hawkish than Rubio of old.
He's more hawkish, but also I think there's much more attention to detail, where Pompeo's background was purely intelligence diplomacy, right? Rubio has good knowledge of the intricacies, especially the relationship between state and treasury. And so we heard that very briefly when Scott Bessent was up for his confirmation hearing, where he was talking about the idea of sanctioning, you know, reimposing those sanctions on Venezuela that the Biden admin took off, but also re-reviewing the individuals who are sanctioned. Rubio has been a very strong opponent of the Biden administration sanctioning individual opposition leaders in Latin America, right? Could we see a more specific, targeted approach in how we handle diplomacy?
No, and I always think of how Israel does a lot of things when, you know, they would do sort of either cyber attacks on Iran. We have so much more ability to do stuff, again, like sanctions, applying pressure, doing all of that sort of thing. If Trump has changed since his first term, it looks like he would be a little more likely to say, okay, the U.S. does have to play a leadership role in the world. But just like old Trump, he's going to try to do that without it even involving a threat of sending in troops or anything like that, using our economic power and all of that. And so that's what I imagine is he said, I want to be a peacemaker, and that involves using smart power and using it when you can.
And Trump has received a lot of friendly fire for removing the security clearance, or not the security clearance, the protection orders for Bolton and Pompeo, because both we know IRGC has fatwas out for them. But at the same time, the two of them had Secret Service details at the same time that the Secret Service was supposed to be protecting Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and he was shot in the head. Is there a justification for this?
I don't know. I mean, because I don't know how credible these fatwas are. I mean, we know that the government sometimes really does overreach, but I'm sure that Bolton, Pompeo, and there are others who, the Iranian government says you should kill this person. That seems pretty scary. So what we have to hope is that Trump has actually decided that this security detail is unnecessary, rather than him just saying, I don't like these guys because they said bad things about me afterwards. Because that is definitely not outside of the realm of possibility with Trump.
We know that Biden made a lot of hay over, pivot to China, pivot to China. He wanted to pivot to China, and I'll give him that credit. And then because of his disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, Ukraine happened, Israel happened, all that. Trump, does he actually have the opportunity here to pivot to China? And if so, what does that look like?
So I think Trump rightly sees that China is a rival, but Trump also is just incredibly impressionable. And so this is a place where I worry, because Elon Musk has business over in China, and Musk has Trump's ear for now, and that China is pretty smart. So it's entirely possible that you could see lots of people and lots of businessmen. One of the ways that China advances its interests is through U.S. companies. They get U.S. companies to lobby the federal government, the U.S. government, for what's not even in the company's interest, but is in China's interest. They say, if you want to do business here, if you want to open a casino in Macau, you have to help push us to extradite this one guy. Whether it's, U.S. manufacturers, or, there was a famous case with the Sands Casino guy, Wynn. And so in that way, I do think Trump will be very vulnerable, very apt to give in to some China demands if it's coming from some of his businessman friends. So that's how you have to hope that he's surrounded by people who say, no, they are not advancing America's interests. Please tune them out.
And we'll see how the rest of his cabinet confirmations go, but having a unanimously confirmed Secretary of State viewed as legitimate across D.C., not a bad place to start.
A step up from the first term. So yes.
Clearly. Thank you so much, Tim. In order to read more of his work and the rest of our newsroom, make sure to go to washingtonexaminer.com. We will see you next week.